And the second thing we learned from these military veterans was that they claimed that their erectile function also improved with smoked cannabis flower. Many of them started the study on Viagra. A lot of them were very young veterans in their 30s, 40s who were already on Viagra. And that was common because so many of these veterans end up getting pummeled with so many different antidepressants that cause them to lose their erectile function. So one of the other trials that we're working on, also collaborating with a Canadian producer, is to examine smoked flower versus Viagra, generic Viagra, to see how it performs in a controlled setting. So we are preparing, we have a team of urologists that's working with us, and we hope to get approvals for that by the end of the year.
We study today endometriosis. If you look on how is activities in female reproductive system, as I told you, so cannabinoid receptors are mainly in brain and reproductive system. So you can see that these are S in uterus, S are in oviduct, and S are in ovaries. So this is very important. These explanations of study of receptors in human reproductive system, because we know that in a healthy system there are CB1 receptors and PPAR receptors. PPAR receptors are important for tetrahydrocannabinolic acid. It's THC before decarboxylation. And if we look on ovary, so you can see that there are SCB1, SCB2, also PPAR receptors, a fatty acid aminohydrolase. It's compound which decompose endocannabinoids. So you can see how is important these endocannabinoids mainly are studied anandamide and 2-AG, 2-arachidonyl glycerol. It was also studied, and there are elevations of CB2 receptor, CB1 receptor, as you can see, and elevation of endocannabinoid 2-AG. So it means that the body start to fight, and in plasma also anandamide is increased. If we look on endometrioma, so endometriosis of ovary, so also there are can be endometriosis come to ovarian cancer, and there is increase of GPR55 receptors and TRPV and MAGLT, monoacylglycerol lipase. When we look at cervical cancer, also you can see that there is increase of CB1, CB2 receptors and vanilloid receptors. So you can see that endocannabinoid system is very important in reproductive system, and it means that it can be used for treatment. So we shall study it. We started, but it's not such easy, but it's known, and maybe some next speaker can tell you also that endometriosis can be treated with cannabis.
Moje vprašanje je, kakšna je povezava biološkega ženskega ciklusa in endokannabinoidnega sistema? Hvala.
Yeah, again, the cannabinoid system regulates everything in your body. What happened? First, let's look at the menstrual cycle. Okay. Prior to ovulation, estrogen levels are high. The key to figuring out what chemicals do what is to take whatever you're interested in and look up, like in PubMed, its relationship with AMP kinase. AMP kinase is kind of the master regulator of whether you turn on fat burning. But it turns out that at ovulation, the estrogen levels drop, and estrogen, it turns out, turns on fat burning via this AMP kinase. You can see that. So that means it's protective, and it's recycling your damaged pieces, which is why women historically have lived longer. And what then happens is, in order to have implantation occur, you need to have You need to have an inflammatory environment. So the endocannabinoid anandamide, which is very highly produced in the uterus and in the female reproductive system and the male reproductive system and everywhere else, but in particular, because it's going to, you have to turn on the sugar burning to have the inflammatory biochemistry in order to have implantation. And similarly, when the sperm is wiggling its way to find that happy egg, it's got to wiggle that tail a lot. So the sperm is burning tons of energy using the mitochondria so that it can get to the egg. And when it gets to the egg, it's got to penetrate the egg by the acrosome reaction. And that's all clustered with mitochondria and ATP generation. But think about what happened. All of the mitochondria inside of the sperm got labeled with free radical damage. And then it gets into the egg, and the egg eats up all of the free radical damage, so now you have the reason for matrilineal inheritance. But going back then to estrogen, we now at least mentioned that estrogen fat burning. Well, when a woman goes into menopause, she loses her cycle because she's lost estrogen production, which means that she's not recycling as much. So what do you see happening to women once they've gone through menopause? They get osteoporosis, they have higher levels of cardiovascular disease, they cognitive dysfunction, they become like men, functionally, in terms of their susceptibility to these illnesses. So hormone replacements will then balance out fat burning some more, but cannabinoids do that as well.